um, important discussion, conversation, exchange. Funding is always one of the more popular, panels that people want to have because these days, particularly with the pandemic, everybody wants to know where's the money, and it's become even more important. Artists have been under lockdown as we are, and there's so few opportunities for them to earn a living, few opportunities to get some sort of support, as we all do living in Canada and in the province, to be able to access funding to create our art, in this case, creating new music. So this panel holds a lot of interest to a lot of people. And it was important for me to try to get a range of funding representatives to break down what the opportunities are and any kind of insights that you guys could provide to make life somewhat easier. I know that even at this stage, as a festival producer, I can tell you that we're not expecting that there will be live outdoor events for the summer, not the way things are going at this point. And, it's commonly known that, one of the last groups to come out of this pandemic will be outdoor festivals and that sort of thing. So we're still in what is known as a bit of a bleak period for artists, getting opportunities to be paid to perform, getting opportunities for funding. So in many ways, you guys are the most important people in their music careers right now. And so we hope that we'll get an opportunity to have you, give us your insights and knowledge about it. But before getting into it, it is important to thank our sponsors. This time, we'd like to acknowledge the support of Factor. We'd like to acknowledge the support of the Canadian Heritage Department and, the Ira Music Festival staff and crew for helping us to get to this point. We'd also like to thank our panelists for making time to be a part of this very important conversation and discussion. So let me try to get going and get out of the way so you guys can hear what these esteemed panelists have to say. They bring a lot of expertise. They bring a lot of know-how. And so we will start the discussion with one of our funders, namely Factor. And Anthony Johnson is the Factor representative here. And Anthony, I hope you can share with our audience your background and help us understand what the funding opportunities are. Okay?
Sounds good. Thank you so much, Phil. And hello again, everybody. I'm really happy to be here on behalf of Factor to talk about how we can support everybody with funding. So I'm going to share my screen and I'll just do my presentation. And then we will also talk more about Factor in the Q&A, I'm sure. So let me just share my screen. Here we go. Can you give me a little sign if you can see it? I think you can, but just want to make sure.
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. You can see it in full screen, right?
Yep.
Brilliant. All right. So hello, everyone. As I said, my name is Anthony Johnson. I am the project coordinator at Factor for Sponsorship and Outreach. So let's talk about Factor a little. So Factor stands for the Foundation Assisting Canadian Talent on Recordings. And what we do is we give grants to Canadian musicians and companies to make and promote Canadian sound recordings and strengthen the industry. So on diversity and inclusion, we are committed to reflecting the diversity of Canada's population, and we're committed to ensuring universal access to our funds, and we're encouraging these values within the broader sector. So more on diversity and inclusion, we've actually created an advisory committee in 2019. So it consists of 16 people representing a variety of backgrounds and geographies in Canada as well. And what they do is they look at all our activities and all our processes and programs, and then they provide feedback and advice and ideas with that diversity and inclusion lens. So currently, the person chairing this committee is Kwende Kafense, who's the ED of CKCU in Ottawa. And he also has a position on our board as the Diversity and Inclusion Observer. So he basically represents and brings up all the comments and feedback of the entire committee on the board. So yeah, obviously there are many ongoing discussions, and I'm sure we'll talk about this more in the Q&A session as well. But it's definitely a very, very important topic and priority right now, especially for our brand new president. So yeah. Now, more about funding in general. Our money comes from the government of Canada through something called the Canada Music Fund, and also by the private sector, so Canada's private radio broadcasters. So we got 30 million in 2019, and we distributed the majority of that. Our programs support Canadian artists and companies and projects in any language other than French. So the reason that we don't support French projects isn't that we don't want to, it's that we, even though we are at the national level, we do have a counterpart in Quebec called Musique Action, and they handle everything in French. And our funding is project-based, so you can access it through various programs, which we'll talk about in just a second. Okay, so first step, getting started. Who is eligible for FACTA funding? In order to be eligible, you need to be a citizen or a permanent resident. So you'll need to have a passport, birth certificate, citizenship card, PR card, or SCIS card. Now, once you're eligible, we have 3 types of profiles in our system. So the first is a user profile, which essentially is your login. The second is an applicant profile. So the applicant is the person or entity that is financially responsible for a project. So it could be yourself as a person, or it could be a company, for instance, corporation. And then you have an artist profile, which is just to give us an idea, a snapshot of where you're at in your artist career. Next, we have something called an artist rating system. So essentially, it's something that determines which kind of programs or levels of funding you can access. So everyone who is brand new to FACTA automatically gets assigned the general rating. But twice a year, there's the option to submit all your data, basically also your streaming, your tour revenue, things like that. And then depending on these results, you could get a higher rating, and then you could potentially access a little bit more funding. Okay, now let's talk about the programs. So the first one is artist development. So the goal of this program is to give you, so this is for artists, by the way, not companies. So give artists up to $2,000 that they can use towards 1 year of artist development activities, which fall under the categories of sound recording, touring, showcasing, video, and marketing. So the way that FACTA works is we basically subsidize 75% of your expenses. So if you get this $2,000, all you need to do is show us that you're spending $2,667. So you're spending this $600 out of your pocket, and you get $2,000. So historically, the policy has been that we need all these expenses to go more towards services, because as I said, our goal is to stimulate the Canadian industry as a whole. So rather than just buying equipment, instead what we like to see is for you to go to a studio and pay an engineer or pay a producer or pay your art person, things like that. However, due to the pandemic, we've been able now to add capital expenses as eligible expenses, but only up to 10%. So you can spend $200 on equipment, and then the rest of that money has to be spent on services. Now, how to apply? All you need is to submit your bio. You have to submit something called an artist development plan. So there's a form in our system with some questions. So you have to answer these questions. Essentially, what we ask here is, where are you at in your career right now? And what do you plan to do during the year? And then you'll have to submit 1 MP3 track. So you can submit an unfinished demo, but this is now advice on how to get the best possible application. We'd recommend to actually submit, not something unfinished, but actually your best possible track, because you want to put your best foot forward, right? So this is artist development. We advise people, if it's your first time ever applying to FACTA, probably to start with that one and then move on to some of the bigger grants afterwards. But well, I'm going to talk about the second one right now, and you can decide. The second is called juried sound recording. So this one is similarly, you can use this funding towards similar categories. However, the goal here is to fund the costs of creating an entire full-length album and also marketing it. So here again, we subsidize 75% of your expenses. So we give you up to $67,000. But if you claim this entire amount, you have to spend $90,000. So it's definitely a bigger scale here. In terms of application, there's also more things that you need to submit, a little bit more work. You do have to describe your goals and your results. You have to submit 2 songs, not just one. And this time they have to be unfinished somehow, because you also have to describe what you're going to change on the songs. So are you going to get them mastered, for example, or are you going to, get an extra artist do a feature or something like that? I don't know, but you have to talk about that. Then you have to submit a detailed marketing plan. And when I say detailed, it's really, as much as professional as you can, because, some of the people who do get those grants, they do submit things that are, let's say, 30, 40 pages sometimes. So the better the marketing plan and the more detailed, the best. And then, yeah, of course, you also have to submit your bio. So that's it for juried sound recording. And now I want to talk about how those grants are actually adjudicated. So contrary to some popular myths, one of which I used to believe before working at Factor, actually Factor doesn't look at these applications, and Factor doesn't decide who gets this money. The people who decide this are the jurors. Now, who are the jurors? They are a pool of over 1,000 music industry professionals from across the whole country, and they are artists, agents, producers, managers, and many other roles. And they've all been working for at least 5 years in the business, and they have been in the business active in the last 3 years. So one thing that's very important to note is when you submit your song, you pick a musical genre, and the jurors that see your application are people from this genre. So if you pick, let's say, rock music, then you should submit a rock song, because all the people that are going to actually see your application will be rock people. So be careful in the selection of the genre. And then what did they look at? So in our program guidelines, you can actually see the rubric in full detail. So it actually gives a breakdown of all the percentages, but essentially what they're looking at, the jurors, are those things mentioned in this slide. So the song, the lyrics, musicality, your marketing plan, and your team. So for the artist development program, which is the first one I mentioned, music counts for 75% of the grade, and the business is 25%. And in the second one, the full album, it's 60% for music and 40% for the business plan. So keep that in mind when you apply as well. Make sure that you look at the rubric so that you really know how to position your grant to get the best possible chances. Okay, next. So you can only apply to one of these programs per year, which is also why I was saying it's good to be strategic sometimes. Do you have, an album and a super professional plan? If yes, definitely go for the juried sound recording. But if you're unsure, it's good to start with artist development, just because, at least you have a higher chance in that case of getting it. Now, for each program, the top 20 applications that don't get funded will actually be allowed to reapply 6 months later instead of a full year. So that's also good to know. Okay, so we spoke about creating your profiles and submitting your applications. And next, what happens when you get the money and you're doing your activities? Well, there is another step called a completion report. So very important to not forget this part. Essentially, it's pretty short, but it just explains to us what you've done. And it's also where you'll actually submit all your receipts and proof of payment and things like that. So just make sure if you do get the money that you keep track of everything, because at the end, a year later, you do have to show us that you did release your album and you did spend the money on the album. So that's the goal of the completion report. Okay, so a couple of stats just for everybody to see. So these were our numbers for 2019, since I think we're still compiling the 2020 ones, but approval rate for artist development was 38%, which is pretty high, it's good. And for juried sound recording was 36%. And we're very happy that so far our funding levels have been going up. So total funding for these programs has doubled in 5 years. So we're able to support more artists. And I hope this continues because it's great news. But yep, these are some facts. And then I wanted to talk about the sponsorship program, which is the program that I am the project coordinator for. So this one is actually very different from the other programs in that for the other programs, the goal when you apply is really talking about how you are elevating yourself and your career as an artist, right? So the marketing plan, it's all about, you know, how are you going to get more streams, get more fans, and go on tour, etc. For sponsorship, it's completely the opposite. It's more, what are you doing for your community? What is the impact for everyone around you? How is this benefiting the Canadian music industry at large? And so as a result, most of what we fund here through sponsorship happens to be things like music festivals, workshops, industry association events, and for instance, events such as this one that we are at currently was a recipient of sponsorship. So this is what we use this program for. And here too, there's extra consideration given to people from underrepresented communities. So it's definitely a very big part of what we're trying to do here is really support more people from these communities. And yeah, sponsorship is a great vehicle for that. And here too, I'm happy to say that the budget has been going up really fast. So I think it quadrupled in the last 3 or 4 years. So yeah. And in terms of applying, all you need to do is submit something called a letter of intent at the beginning, which outlines what your plan is. And then if accepted, then you can just go in and provide more detail and your budget. And then that is pretty much it for sponsorship. Now, I just wanna, I know I've probably gone a little over 10 minutes, so I'm gonna wrap this up quickly, but some resources that are really important for everybody to know is the website. So, you know, at the start, it may be hard to navigate, but there is a section called applicant resources. If you click on that, you have all the guides, step-by-step tutorials to apply. And also, of course, the program guidelines. So like I said, good to check them out because it shows the grading rubric and you can see specifically what the jurors are looking for. Also, you can look at our annual reports just to get some more context on everything that we've been funding. Another thing too is the project coordinator. So project coordinators at Factor are the staff members that are here to literally answer all your questions. So I myself am the project coordinator for the sponsorship program. If you're applying for it, you should take advantage of that resource. You can email me 10 times if you want. You can call me. I'm here to help you. So, and we find a lot of people, artists who register, sometimes don't even really know that the project coordinator is there for that. But literally, this is our job. It's to help you. So absolutely take advantage. And then otherwise, you know, you can look at our business policies and of course, sign up for our newsletter to see more of the programs that we're rolling out. And that is pretty much it for the Factor presentation. So thank you for having me present this. And I look forward to talking more about us in the Q&A section. Oh, Phil, I think you're muted.
All right. Thank you very much, Anthony. That was a great presentation. And we're off and running. And the next person up is Mr. Dwayne Dixon, a man who has been involved on the outside as a music presenter, having worked in a number of organizations, including Manifesto and NIA, and now he's on the inside as a music officer, interim music officer at Ontario Arts Council. I know Dwayne has the interest of artists at heart, given his past. And so Dwayne, I turn this over to you, sir, so you can share with us what's up at Ontario Arts Council.
Right, indeed. Thank you, Phil. And greetings to everyone, including my fellow panelists. I'll do a high-level overview of the programs offered in the music office at the Ontario Arts Council. So let me just share my screen. And just give me a thumbs up if you could see that. All right, looks like we're good. Well, good stuff. So again, I'll give you a high-level overview. My name is Dwayne Dixon, Interim Music Officer at the Ontario Arts Council. We're going to talk about a little bit about the Arts Council, you know, how long they've been around, the music office overview. As you know, or you may not know, but Ontario Arts Council deals with several different artistic disciplines. I work in the music office, and that's where we'll focus. Do a quick overview of artists of color and how the OAC treats artists of color. what is included in your application, how assessment works, and then a few tips for you, all right? So a little bit about the Ontario Arts Council. It's been around for 55 plus years and is an arm's length funding agency of the Ministry of Heritage, Sport, Tourism, and Culture Industries, with a mandate to foster the creation and production of arts for the benefit of all Ontarians. OAC supports professional artists, ad hoc groups, and collectives, and not-for-profit organizations through a range of project and operating grant programs. OAC is committed to ensuring equitable access for all Ontarians, with particular emphasis on the following 6 priority groups: Indigenous artists, artists of color, Francophone artists, new generation artists, artists and organizations located in regions outside of Toronto, and deaf artists and artists with disabilities. In the music office, we oversee 4 programs, 5 including music projects in Francophone, so that's strictly in French, which I won't go into in depth, but it really supports all of the French-speaking Francophone artists across the province. We handle music creation, operating core funding for music organizations, music production and presentation projects, and music recording projects. So if you think about the offerings, it takes you from the creation stage, so songwriting, thinking about what it is you're going to do through recording, and then to ultimately presenting your work to the public. Music creation projects. This program supports Ontario-based professional artists in creating original musical works, supporting music creators at all stages of their career, working in all music genres and styles. There are 2 deadlines per year, April 14th and September 15th in 2021. And there are 2 categories for this program. One is self-directed creation and the other is commissioning. This program funds composition, creation of new original work, and it may also include creation of a companion piece or additional movements intended to accompany an earlier composition, completion of a larger scale work under development, for an example, an opera, or music incorporating other media or art forms. The maximum amount is, the grant amount, sorry, is $4,000 for self-directed creations and $20,000 for commissioning. For music organizations for operating, this program supports the ongoing operations of not-for-profit opera companies, orchestras, choral organizations, and other music mandated producers and presenters in Ontario. Again, with 2 deadlines per year, March 9th, which is already passed, and that's for all organizations except for festivals. And then October 15th would include festivals only. The priorities include activities that engage Ontario and Canadian professional musicians and support the work of Ontario and Canadian composers and songwriters, unless restricted by genre, for example, early music ensemble. Activities that support public access to a broad range of music forms and the development of audiences. In addition, activities that may contribute to arts education, public participation, and community involvement in the arts in Ontario. And then activities that advance the development of music in Ontario. And I just want to note, as you know, COVID-19 has impacted the music industry like no other. And the OAC has also had to make pivots. So for 2021, the OAC has put a pause on the multi-year cycles of all operating programs. And the OAC will not be accepting any new applicants to the operating programs for 2021. Next up, we have music production and presentation projects. This program supports the development and presentation of all genres of live and now virtual music by Ontario-based professional musicians, ad hoc groups or collectives, and organizations. There are 6 categories of activity: rehearsal and repertoire development, single performances or concerts, a concert series, music festivals, and opera productions, and second stage opera workshops. Again, there are 2 deadlines per year, March 25th and October 5th, 2021. And yes, I did say March 25th. Today was a deadline, and it's been extremely busy at the OAC today for the music team. And as we move on to music recording projects, this is one that I oversee solely, and the music program supports the recording of music by Ontario-based musicians, including composers, songwriters, and beat producers. 2 deadline dates are May 13th and November 9th, 2021 at 1 p.m. There are 2 categories, demo and EP recordings, and then full-length album. The program's priorities are to support music created by Ontario's composers, songwriters, as well as works by other Canadians. If your project features non-Ontario composers, a compelling case should be made for how the project will add to what is currently available to the public. For example, currently unrecorded rare music or a foremost performer of the music of a specific composer. Projects that enhance the range of recorded music available to the public, whether locally, nationally, and internationally, and then projects that are ready or nearly ready to begin the recording process. Again, there are 2 maximum grant amounts. So for demo and EP recordings, you have $4,000 maximum. And for full-length albums, a $10,000 maximum grant award. Now, in addition to the 6 priority groups I spoke about at the beginning, we have artists of colors. And the Ontario Arts Council recognizes that historic and systemic barriers have affected access to opportunities and resources for many people of color, which has led to the marginalization and inequities for many artists of color in the arts funding landscape. Applicants who are of color are encouraged to apply to any program in which their activities are eligible. In addition, OAC has a number of programs that were created specifically to meet the needs of artists who are of color, including curatorial projects, Indigenous and culturally diverse, dance training projects, equity and access, skills and career development, Indigenous arts and professionals and arts professionals of color. My colleague Bushra Junaid was actually on a panel, I believe it was yesterday, as part of this conference. As we move on to assessment, there are 3 categories that are being assessed. That's our artistic merit, impact, and viability. Now, it is a juried process. So when completing applications, you want to speak very clearly, articulately, concise, and speak with the passion. Don't lose that passion about your project when you're, transitioning it into words. That comes across to the group of assessors. And who are these assessors, you ask? Well, assessors are professional artists and other arts professionals across Ontario. They represent a diversity of artistic and cultural practices and expertise, represent the diversity of the province, example, race, age, region, language, gender, and ability, as well as Indigenous and Francophone perspectives. They bring vision, open-mindedness, and generosity of spirit to their deliberations. They provide fair and objective analysis based on assessment criteria. They also treat the applications equitably, without prejudice, in accordance with the principles of the Ontario Human Rights Code, United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, and OAC's equity statement and vision. They're able to work collaboratively together, when deliberating, and are willing to express their views while respecting and listening to the views of others. Now, here's a few tips. Please pay close attention to these tips, especially the first one. Call the program officer well before the deadline. So that would be myself or some of my colleagues in the music office. If you have questions, if you're unsure, program deadlines open up, or applications, they open up 2 months prior to the deadline. So there's ample time for applicants, prospective applicants, to get in contact with me or my colleagues to find out to answer your questions. You know, what are your questions? Where are you stuck? What advice do you need? We're here to help. Okay, so call the program officer well before the deadline. Consider your audience, example, other artists. Write with the passion, as I mentioned earlier, that you have for the project, and then edit it with objectivity. Ask someone around you to read your grant before submitting. You know, call me, or ask my colleagues to see if I have time to review your draft. And if I have time, I'll definitely review it and give you my feedback. Use a clean and simple font layout. Casing is important. You want to keep, you know, uppercase and lowercase is where they should be. Be detailed but concise. Don't repeat, and stay within your word limits. Oftentimes, what I read is, you know, from one answer to another is, as previously mentioned. I would refrain from including previously mentioned. Again, try to speak with the eloquence and effort that you put into your art. This does translate. When working on your budget, start with expenses. Give yourself lots of time to develop your project and fill out the application. Spell check. And if you see what we did there, it's not spelled properly. So definitely that's important. It will influence some of the assessors on the panel. And don't underestimate your support material. Put the effort. If it is a rough sounding demo, make sure you identify it as such. If it's finished and previously released work, also do the same. And then last but not least, get it in on time. All right, the deadline is at 1 p.m. on deadline days, not 5 p.m., not at 11:59, it's at 1 p.m. So my advice to you would be the night before, maybe 2 nights before, ensure that you've reviewed it 3 times, 4 times, as many times as you need to not run up against that 1 p.m. deadline, okay? A lot of things could happen, servers could go down, at home or, you know, wherever you're working from. So you want to ensure you're giving yourself the best opportunity to get into this competition. And that is my time. Thank you very much. And I'm sure we'll have questions in the Q&A. Okay. There we go. I feel you might be muted.
All right. Thank you, Dwayne. Much appreciated. Next up, we have a woman who's played an outsized role in the development of Canada's previously known as Canada's urban music industry. I think we've dispensed with that term these days. And, you know, that's an outcome of the BLM protests from last summer and a greater awareness of some of the inequities and racial injustices that we have been dealing with and continue to deal with in many ways. Aisha is the program consultant for Ontario Creates. And as I said, she's worn a lot of different hats over the years, including working at radio, also working previously with the Urban Music Association of Canada, just to name a few. So without any further ado, please help us welcome Aisha Wickham. Thank you.
I can hear the applause. I'm going to share my screen now. And thank you very much, Phil, for that introduction, and to all of you who have dedicated some of your time this afternoon to listen and learn and also ask questions. Obviously, we have a tight time frame, so I'm going to keep my remarks focused on a high-level overview of Ontario Creates and the Music Investment Fund, but happy to speak a bit more in depth about broader topics when we do get to the Q&A. Also had to turn my notifications off because it's the trade deadline coming up and who knows what's going to happen this afternoon. But with that, I will dive into the presentation. Ontario Creates is an agency of Ontario's Ministry of Heritage, Tourism, Culture and Sport. Tourism, Sport and Culture Industries. Essentially, that means we get our core funding from that ministry, as does the Ontario Arts Council. What distinguishes us is we're more focused on economic development and industrial development, and OAC is more focused on artistic merit and development. Our agency facilitates economic development, investment, and collaboration in Ontario's creative industries, which includes the music, book, magazine, film, television, and interactive digital media sectors. The Ontario Music Office specifically focuses on funding and business development support, strategic business-to-business initiatives as well, such as export missions, when that's possible, again in person, but we do virtual missions currently, and events such as Music Makes It, which is actually happening this afternoon as we speak. That event is a business-to-business event that brings together the live music sector with the performing arts sector. That's the focus of this particular event, to discuss collaboration and partnership possibilities and to share information and resources on the road to recovery from COVID-19. So in addition to funding, we also do business-to-business connections and interaction at the industry and company level. The OMO team is comprised of a manager, 3 program consultants, of which I'm one, 2 program coordinators, and a senior financial officer. The Ontario Music Investment Fund is a $7 million per year fund, provides targeted economic development investment to the province's vibrant and diverse music industry. The OMIS supports Ontario music companies that demonstrate strong growth potential, and the goal is to maximize return on investment, as well as create more opportunities for emerging artists to record and perform within the province of Ontario. The program has 3 streams, which I'll briefly touch on in this overview. They're tailored to different aspects of Ontario's music ecosystem. So across the 3 streams, our objective is to touch and support every sector within the music industry in the province. Again, this is a really quick and high-level overview, so I encourage you to visit our website at ontariocreates.ca for more in-depth program details. And I'll provide a link at the end of my remarks to where you can register for our e-news updates and bulletins, which will announce program deadline updates and program launches. Before I touch on the 3 streams, I just want to give a brief overview of eligibility. So all applicants must have revenues of $25,000 or more. Again, this is a more of a company-focused program than an artist-based program. So the idea is for our various funding agencies to complement one another. And so there's distinguishing factors between each agency. And so we're more at the level where you've built up some commercial viability and you've developed some traction from a revenue generation standpoint. And at that point, Ontario Creates could come in and help you amplify and accelerate that growth. So that's why we have a revenue threshold. You must be incorporated and in operation for at least 2 years. You must have a head office in Ontario and key management personnel who are Canadian citizens or permanent residents that are living in Ontario. And you must be in good standing with Ontario Creates at the time of application. Basically, that means if you're already a funding recipient, that you're up to date on all of your reporting requirements. And while Ontario Creates does not have specific program streams for BIPOC individuals, exceptions to all of the requirements above may be considered for applicants from companies that are led by BIPOC individuals, Black, Indigenous, people of color, as well as Francophone individuals and applicants from other equity-seeking groups. First-time applicants must contact the Ontario Music Office at least 3 weeks ahead of the deadline to discuss eligibility. And those that are seeking an exception should also contact us at least 3 to 4 weeks ahead to discuss your particular circumstance. The application process is very in-depth, so it's really important to reach out ahead of time and talk through both your eligibility as well as your proposed activities as both of the previous presenters very eloquently articulated. We are all public servants and we are here to serve you. So, you know, please take advantage of the advice that we exist to give you. First up, I'll talk about the music creation stream. So I'm the team lead on this particular stream. And this stream is focused on supporting record labels and music publishers, companies that take risks discovering and developing talent and bringing it to market. Due to the realities of systemic racism and lack of inclusion, Ontario Creates will consider high potential self-releasing Black and Indigenous artist entrepreneurs as a record label for the purpose of eligibility for funding opportunities with our agency through the OMIF. That's a distinction that was important for us to make because the previous OMF, Ontario Music Fund, which operated from 2013 to 2019-20, had an eligible stream specifically for artist entrepreneurs. When the program was reduced in funding in 2019 as part of the provincial budget to streamline it down to a $7 million program, at that time the eligible applicant classes were reduced as well. So we put in place that rule for high potential Black and Indigenous artists. Eligible activities and costs include recording and production, video production, touring and showcasing, marketing and promotion, artist development activities for publishers such as song camps, as well as admin and overhead costs, which are capped at 25% of your total budget. Funding is a direct grant for up to 50% of total costs. The cap on public funding is 75%. So if you're applying to any of the other funders, you can receive other funding towards our support, but it cannot exceed 75% of your total budget. Applicants must have, as I said, a minimum level of revenue of $25,000. And basically the maximum amount you can request is calculated based on 40% of your 2-year average revenue figure. So that just helps determine capacity from the standpoint of what is a reasonable investment in your company based on your demonstrated track record of revenue generation. For all programs that I'm discussing, there's a maximum 12-month activity spending window. And again, once the program's guidelines are released, we'll get much more into detail on what those windows are for your spending. And again, please reach out to us at least 3 weeks ahead to discuss potential eligibility. There will be one program deadline. This year it will be in mid-July. The program will launch with full guidelines in late April. We do information sessions, multiple sessions, and they'll be hosted in mid to late May. So I encourage you to sign up at the link I'll provide at the end of my remarks, and you'll get much more detailed information in those sessions. So they're very worthwhile to participate in. The second stream is the music industry initiative stream. This stream is focused on supporting music industry trade associations and music service organizations to undertake professional development and export activities, as well as conduct industry analysis and build regional capacity. So eligible activities include initiatives that are focused on strategic development, professional development, market development, skills development, and digital innovation. This stream will launch in mid-May, and this one has a rolling deadline to the end of October. And what that means is you can apply at any point between May to the end of October. There's not one fixed deadline in this stream. The exception to that is that we do have a distinct program within the overarching music industry initiative stream that offers up to $10,000 in export and market development funding, specifically for music managers. That program is the Global Market Development for Music Managers program, and that will have a late July deadline. And that'll be launching in mid-May as well. So all of the details will be available at that time. And the third and final stream that I'll touch on is the live music stream. Eligible applicants in this stream include music promoters and presenters, and that can be for-profit or not-for-profit, that produce or promote live music events featuring Canadian artists, including music festivals and concert series. Eligible costs include Canadian artist fees, venue rental and or the cost of live streaming or virtual performance hosting, production and on-stage signage costs, Ontario-based tech, security, and other crew members, advertising and marketing, and admin and overhead and business development costs as well. In this stream, the maximum funding request is $125,000 with a similar revenue formula of 40% of a company's 2-year average revenue figure. And this stream will launch in late summer with a deadline in early October. And again, once you've applied, there's a 12-month spending window for your activities. And I just want to distinguish that we're not a project-based application process, although you could apply for one distinct project. We're more positioned as a slate-based funding agency. So we support sort of a holistic operational approach for a company, which could entail multiple activities within one application. And finally, I'll just touch briefly on our assessment criteria. In our info sessions, we have an entire section on the application process, the various components that are required for an application. So that process is quite in depth. And again, I encourage you to participate in our info sessions, but they are focused on sort of business development pieces and strategic development and how you're going to create jobs and grow your revenue, or in this current COVID climate, how are you going to be resilient and maintain sustainability during these times? So I'll just touch on the criteria that we look at when we're reviewing applications. First is track record, and what we look at there is, does your company demonstrate that it has a track record and the capacity based on your requested amount to effectively undertake the activities? We look at financial risk and how effectively you articulate your company's capacity to undertake the proposed activities, and how strong is your, how stable is your company based on the financial statements that you submit. The overall proposal, and as Dwayne said, yes, spelling counts. Basically, are your activities well articulated? Is your application thorough and practical? Are your budgets feasible, and does the range of activities you're proposing seem achievable for a company of your size and scope? Economic and cultural impact. What is your company's potential to deliver a broader impact on the industry and the province based on your proposed activities? And what types of tangible and measurable return on investment will your activities deliver, such as job creation? And that doesn't have to be full-time positions. It could be a number of freelance or contract positions, and increased reporting activity in the province. Those are our key objectives. Resilience and sustainability. Does your proposal demonstrate forward-thinking strategic planning, particularly in light of the COVID-19 crisis? And do the activities you're proposing position your company for long-term growth and sustainability? Support for emerging talent. To what degree does the application focus on supporting and developing emerging artists? And what is the diverse range of your artists that are on your roster? And then finally, diversity, equity, and inclusion. This is a lens that we look through all of the assessment criteria, but specifically to what extent do your activities and company support and reflect diversity in Ontario. So that's in terms of the makeup of your senior management team, your staff, your roster, as well as your operations and your intent in terms of internal training and understanding of how to be more diverse and inclusive as a company. So these are the questions to keep in mind as you're developing your application. Those are the key criteria that will set successful applications apart from those that are unsuccessful. We do have a very high success rate relative to other programs that might have a much higher volume of applications. Again, we're company specific and slate based. So typically we'll work with applications in terms of a reduced funding amount rather than an outright no. We do turn down applications, of course. However, there's such a broad range of amounts that can be requested that in some cases, particular activities are chosen to be supported over others. So this link on the screen here, really encourage you to sign up for our e-blasts, our bulletins. Once the program's launch, you'll get an email with all of the details where you can review the guidelines. They're currently available on our site, but they will be updated when the new programs launch at the dates that I indicated earlier. And that's my direct email there. So feel free to reach out to me directly if you have any specific questions. And thank you for your time.
All right, thank you very much, Aisha. And we're gonna have to have a talk with folks around here to use spell check, and especially people's names. We've had some issues with that. So public apology for that. And yeah, you better make sure that you do get that straight, folks. Now we have up next Corey Poole. And Corey and I have had some opportunities to talk about a job that he has come into for what, a few years now, Corey?
Yeah, I've been with the city of Mississauga since July 2019, so coming up on 2 years. Yeah.
And Corey is the, let me get this right, the music development officer at the city of Mississauga. And it's a huge job because there's going to be a lot of reliance on Corey to basically come up with a plan that will set Mississauga on course to nurturing the music scene out of Mississauga. So at this point, let me turn it over to Mr. Corey Poole.
Thank you so much, Phil. And I have to kick it off by saying thanks to you and Donna for all the amazing work that you do in Mississauga. I'm personally really grateful for all the events, music events that you bring between IRE and Sauga City. It's amazing stuff. So thank you. And thanks also to Anthony, Dwayne, and Aisha for all the information that you shared so far with everyone. So yeah, like Phil mentioned, I'm the music development coordinator at the city of Mississauga in our music office, which has only been open coming up on 2 years now. The main project that we're working on right now is a music strategy for the city. This will be the city of Mississauga's first music strategy, looking at ways that we can better support and grow the music sector. When we began embarking on this strategy, it was before the pandemic hit, so we have had to change course a bit and make some adjustments to ensure that what we're developing provides both short-term support for COVID-19 economic response and recovery for the music sector, in addition to those long-term strategic initiatives that are aimed more at long-term growth. So we've conducted a lot of engagement so far for the music strategy between one-on-one interviews. And in December of 2020, we opened up a survey to the public, so residents and members of the Mississauga community all had an opportunity to give their feedback and have a say in sort of what direction that strategy takes. But I think it's really important to note that engagement is sort of ongoing and I'd like to think never ending on this piece. So if anyone has any thoughts or feedback or suggestions on the music strategy, on how we might better support and grow the sector, and especially feedback and suggestions from BIPOC artists and music business owners, please provide them. I'm going to put my email address into the chat right now. But if anyone can't read that, it's corey.poole@mississauga.ca. So corey.poole. I think this panel is super timely, not only because it's always important to discuss funding for artists and music businesses, but over the last couple of weeks, there have been a few important announcements aimed at mitigating the impact of the pandemic on the music sector and sort of helping the music sector to rebound from that pandemic. I'm just gonna have a quick drink of water. So what I'll touch on today are a few things. First, I'm going to speak to the funding opportunities for culture nonprofits at the city of Mississauga through our Arts and Culture Grant Program. Next, I'm going to touch on a few opportunities for musicians and music businesses offered by the city of Mississauga. And I'm going to end off touching on some additional funding and training opportunities specifically for artists and some of them that are geared specifically towards BIPOC artists and creatives. So first, at the City of Mississauga, our Arts and Culture Grant Program has three main streams that are geared towards arts and culture nonprofits, and of course music is included within those. So I'm going to pop a link to our PDF guidebook in the chat right there as well. I also want to note that if anyone has any questions specifically about our arts and culture grants, you can email grantsinfo@mississauga.ca. So within all of these grants and within the program, we're always looking to improve access to the programs and ensure that grant applications are received from diverse and underrepresented Mississauga communities, and also ensure that continuous feedback is received about how these grant programs can better meet the needs of Mississauga's diverse residents. So without further ado, I'll dive into the streams here. The first is our Arts and Culture Grant, and this one is operational funding. I just see oh yeah, they should be in the. Oh, you know what? I'm sending my. I got a question in the chat that I just saw, so I send the links to the attendees by accident. So I'm just going to pop or the panelists by accident. I'm going to pop these back in here for all the attendees as well. So you should be able to see those now. I put my contact information and also the link to our grant guidelines there. So my apologies. So first, our Arts and Culture Grant, and this one is operational funding to support arts, culture, and of course music activities in Mississauga. This Arts and Culture Grant is for not-for-profits operating that are governed by a board of volunteers and have a specific mandate to provide arts, culture, and heritage activities. They need to be operating year-round, and companies or organizations applying for this grant do need to be based and active in Mississauga, and they need to be providing programs and services that are open to the public and publicized citywide. In 2020, some of the grant recipients of this grant specifically were the Canadian Arabic Orchestra, a group called Eagle Spirits of the Great Water, who are a nonprofit arts and culture organization managed by local Indigenous people from varying nations in Mississauga. The second grant stream that I want to mention is our Cultural Festivals and Celebrations Grant. This one, obviously, like the name suggests, it supports festivals and celebrations in Mississauga that are cultural and obviously could include music events as well. To be eligible for this one, the organization would need to also operate on a not-for-profit basis. It would need to run an event or festival that runs for one full day or for a number of consecutive days. For this grant, the event or festival needs to take place in Mississauga, but the applicant doesn't need to be Mississauga based. So just the event needs to be here. And again, the program or services need to be open to the public and publicized citywide. So some of the 2020 recipients of this grant included Bollywood Monster Mashup, which is the largest South Asian festival in Canada, TD Mosaic, which includes the music festival Rock the Coliseum, and also the Mosaic Film Festival, and Muslim Fest, which is North America's largest Muslim festival, with over 80 local and international artists performing. Finally, we have a Culture Projects Grant. And like the name suggests with this one, it's project specific. And organizations can apply to this grant for up to 50% of their total project budget or $10,000, whichever is less. This one, applicants can only apply for one cultural project per year. The event or the project must take place in Mississauga, but with this grant, the applicant does not need to be based in Mississauga as well. So some of the recipients in 2020 for this grant were Monstrosity Creative Community, who operates a artist development program focused on marketing, social media, business skills development, primarily for the South Asian community. And also, again, Eagle Spirits of the Great Waters that I mentioned earlier. As far as the timeline for these grants go, they are awarded on an annual basis, and applications for 2022 grants will be opened in the fall of 2021. The projects that you're applying for must take place between January 1st, 2022 and December 31st, 2022. And in terms of, how applicants can increase their chances of being successful for this grant, we're very open and willing, and what we'd like to do is work directly with the applicants to provide advice and feedback through the application process. So you should never hesitate to reach out to the grants coordinator to review drafts or provide guidance throughout the application process. And also, you feel free to reach out to me if you're a music business, because our music office is intended to serve as a resource for the music community and a resource to provide information for anything happening in City Hall, or any processes that you might need to follow, or a resource for any other resources that might be available in the industry. So next I'll move on to some opportunities that we have for musicians at the City of Mississauga. The first is called Starter Company Plus that I'll mention, and it is run by the Mississauga Business Enterprise Center. So Starter Company Plus is a business skills and training and mentorship program with a grant component for entrepreneurs. Now, the program itself is not geared specifically towards artists and music businesses, but in 2020, we did run 2 editions with a music specific focus, and we had grants of up to $2,500 available at the end of the program through a pitch competition amongst the participants of that program. Like I mentioned, it's delivered through the Mississauga Business Enterprise Center, and it's funded through the province of Ontario. And it's intended for entrepreneurs who are ready to launch a full-time business or expand a business in Mississauga. And you don't need to be a resident of Mississauga to apply, but your business does need to be based in Mississauga. And applications are not yet open for the 2021 round of this program, but I'll pop the link into the chat again here for the Starter Company Plus page. And I will also mention that, there we go, that even though the general stream isn't tailored specifically towards musicians, artists and music businesses are more than welcome to apply to the general stream of Starter Company Plus. Next up is our 2021 Summer Concert Series. And we just opened applications this week on Tuesday for the 2021 series. Typically, this concert series takes place in July and August in Port Credit Memorial Park and Streetsville Village Square, with a slate of around 16 events. Last year, we weren't able to produce those events in public, so we moved to a filmed concert series in Meadowvale Theatre, working with the technical services team from Celebration Square, and I thought those film performances really turned out fantastically. They looked and sounded great. And so the direction that we're taking this year is a hybrid approach with 8 filmed concerts and, if possible, 6 in-person events that will hold likely in August. If we can do so, I have my fingers crossed. So I'd really like to encourage artists of diverse cultures and performing in diverse styles of music to apply to this program. The artists are selected through an adjudication committee of members of the Mississauga music community. And the applications will be open until April 13th. The payments for this series are $550 for selected artists. Last year we had a really awesome lineup, including Canadian Arabic Orchestra, I Am Rebel Will, who brought some incredible background dancers, S4, G4, Andrea Mendez, and even a performance in Italian by an artist named Kat Bernardi. As far as some opportunities outside the city of Mississauga, I would like to point to the awesome work being done by the Mississauga Arts Council. I'm going to pop the link to their website in the link here. And I know they presented a webinar about home recording, I think, as part of this conference as well. They will occasionally have funding opportunities for local artists. Recent projects include a project matching microgrant program. They just wrapped up a series called the TD Culture Lab webinar series. This is professional development opportunities. And one of the sessions within this series was called Effective Grant Writing for Artists. And that is still available on their website for anyone who would like to check that out. They also have a microgrant program that provides $2,000 to $7,000 for local artists in 2021 details. It looks like they haven't been announced yet for that program, but I would keep an eye on their social media and their website. You can also sign up for their newsletter to get those updates directly to your inbox. Very importantly, I'd like to mention the Unison Benevolent Fund because the province of Ontario just a couple weeks ago committed $2 million in funding support to the Unison Benevolent Fund for their COVID-19 relief program. The Interim Benevolent Fund is just an incredible organization that provides emergency financial relief, counseling and support to the music community. So artists and also music industry workers, music professionals working in the industry. There's no set deadline for this program, and I'm going to pop the link into the chat here as well. But this funding from the province, the purpose is to immediately support individual musicians and industry workers. Many who have lost their source of income during the pandemic. And, like I said, in addition to this financial assistance program supported by the province, they offer counseling services and mental health support. The eligibility guidelines to register with Unison are that you must have worked primarily in the music industry for at least 2 years or 55% of your career. A couple opportunities that I'll have to shout out here as well are offered through the SOCAN Foundation, who are doing incredible work in inclusivity. I will put the link in the chat here too. They run 2 programs that I'll mention today. One is the Black Canadian Music Awards. And to be eligible for this, you need to be a Canadian citizen, identify as Black, you need to be a SOCAN member, and the original creator of your musical submission. Now with this program, there are up to 5 awards of $5,000. The SOCAN Foundation also runs the QD Indigenous Songwriter Award, and this is one prize of $10,000. And because I know I'm probably missing some big Kyle Lowry news while I'm speaking right now, I will shout out one program that the Raptors have just opened right now called the Welcome Toronto Creators Program. And this one is focused on spotlighting emerging BIPOC artists between the ages of 19 to 29. They have submissions open until Monday, March 9th. And it's a one-time compensation of $7,500, also including mentorship from MLSE and their partners. And I'm going to pop that link in the chat as well. So yeah, I'd like to finish my section here by saying thanks again, looking forward to the Q&A. And if anyone has any questions or comments, or you're an artist or a music business in Mississauga, please don't hesitate to reach out by email. It's corey.poole@mississauga.ca.
Thank you, Corey. Lots of information there for people to chew on, and it's all there in the chat, so you can get access to that. And the man's been busy as the music officer out in Mississauga, so props to you on that. I want to take the time while opening it up for some questions to ask once again, because some folks wanted to know this. Would you be able to perhaps place your grant deadlines, upcoming grant deadlines in the chat for people to, maybe take that home with them? I suspect a lot of people would want to take advantage of that. And a few questions just to kick it off, because, this is the second week of our conference, and one of the themes that keep coming up time and time again is there's a level of frustration that some artists have with submitting what they think is a good application, only to be rejected. So are there any tips that you guys can provide? Do you make yourselves available? How can they do better with this? Can they hire a grant writer? These are some of the questions that, we'd just like to do a quick round and hear what you guys have to say about this. Who wants to go first?
I'll jump in. So it's Dwayne with the Ontario Arts Council. Yeah, so some tips, definitely, again, access myself, my colleagues via phone prior to submitting your application. Again, I would say at least 3 weeks in advance. Ask your questions. Again, if I have time, I will read your draft and I'll provide you some feedback. If you're unsuccessful with an application, there's an opportunity to call us, speak to me directly, to get information about what you could do better. If the assessors had discussed and were deliberating about your project, I will share that feedback with you. So that's important. That's an important piece of development. And one thing I'll also say is diversify your revenue streams. I mean, the programs within music at the Ontario Arts Council, excuse me, is highly competitive. And the success rate for, let's say, music recording projects is about 16%. So sometimes it's not about your amazing project. It's due to lack of funds. We can't fund as many amazing projects as we'd like to, but we'll definitely be there to support your development, your growth, and give you feedback for your applications, but diversify your revenue streams.
All right. Did anyone else want to pick up on this?
I can jump in. I love what you said, Dwayne, about reaching out to the staff of the funding organizations. Absolutely. We're really here to help people and, tell them, give them all the feedback they need. But another thing that I'll add to that is reach out to people who did get those grants. So one thing that we've been doing recently, we started last year and we're doing them monthly now, is info sessions, each of them targeted towards specific underrepresented groups. So our last one actually was for the Black community, Black artists and entrepreneurs. And we did an info session where we explained the whole process, but then we also brought in 2 factor-funded artists, Toby and Chelsea Stewart, who they both did the grant by themselves and they got it. And they were there to answer everyone's questions and share their own perspective applying. So definitely, if you're an artist looking to get some funding, look at our list of recipients, which is all public, and you can, try to get in touch with them or attend those sessions where we have people who did get those grants so that they can share those perspectives with you.
All right. Aisha, did you want to add anything to that?
I think both Anthony and Dwayne had excellent points that I would echo. In our case, the approval rate is quite a bit higher, closer to 70% in terms of recipients that are approved. But I do want to distinguish that we have a much lower volume because it's companies in Ontario for a slate of 12-month activities. So it's easier to get a yes with Ontario Creates, but it is harder to meet that eligibility. So the conversations before applying are just as important as seeking feedback after the awards are announced. To discuss your current eligibility or an exception if you are from an equity seeking group. The idea is that we want to invest in growth. So not necessarily at the startup phase, but if there's high potential there and you can provide some demonstration that you're on track to develop that growth, the eligibility criteria that I spoke about earlier, we do have a lot of flexibility there. If you are unsuccessful, again, it's a very competitive process. Many that are approved are not approved at the full amount of the request. So encourage you to seek that feedback and then to try again next year. It can be frustrating to get a rejection. However, just recognize that you're not alone in a no. It's just we are here to provide that feedback. So definitely take advantage of that opportunity and just continue to persevere at it.
And Corey, what advice would you give on folks who do become frustrated with perhaps not hitting it out of the park the first time?
Yeah, So I suppose it would depend on what sort of funding you're applying for. If you're looking at one of the grants available through the City of Mississauga's grants program, like I said, get in touch with the grants coordinators. They'll be more than happy to walk through the application, walk through your drafts, provide advice. People can always feel free to reach out to the music office, to me, because we participate in a lot of the webinars that have to do with new funding that's announced. So, you know, we might have some information on what they're looking for within those program applications, or provide some other support for your application. So always happy to do that and be a resource where we can. And also, you know, I would suggest, like I said, using the Mississauga Arts Council as a resource. They've got a fundraising specialist on a board of directors, and I'm sure they'd be, you know, more than happy to provide any insight that they can.
Okay, now this is a question directed for Dwayne from the one of the folks listening, and it reads, what is the difference between the OAC grants due April 14th and May 13th?
Okay, so April 14th, you're talking about music creation. So they're different programs within the music office. So the April 14th deadline you're referring to is for music creation projects. So when you're in that phase of determining what you're ready to produce or record, or, you know, you're in the songwriting phase, you're in the collaboration stage, you're in the rehearsal and repertoire stage, that is where you would want to focus your energy to submit your application on the April 14th deadline. The May 13th deadline is specific to music recording projects. So you're ready to record. You've gone through the songwriting phase. You know what you're going to the studio for. You have your collaborators, and you're ready to record. That's what the May 13th deadline is about. And again, that is one of our higher volume programs. To give you a sense, with the last deadline, was it November 18th, 2020, there were 395 applications, okay? Of which 65 received funding. Okay, so it's sometimes, again, it's not your project or the quality of your project, but rather, you know, it's very, very competitive. But again, we're here for that feedback.
Okay, excellent. And the other question I have is, I've heard from each of you, there appears to be, and you can clarify this, that there's now an effort to provide more funding for BIPOC artists. Is that the case? And is this a significant change? Anyone? Yes, no?
I can jump in. So Factor, as of right now, we don't have a program specifically for BIPOC people. However, we have really increased budgets of the programs that really are mostly targeted towards BIPOC people. So I'll speak on the the program that I am taking care of right now, sponsorship. This one quadrupled this budget in the last 3 or 4 years or so. So that's one thing. And then in terms of having a program for BIPOC people, so it's not yet happening, but I do know that it is at the highest levels of discussions right now with the president, the board, and Canadian Heritage, because I think everyone recognizes that this is, you know, important and a direction that we're starting to go into. But in the meantime, though, I'll also say, even though we don't have a program for BIPOC people, in all our outreach efforts, we are doing everything we can to make sure that people from underrepresented communities have a better chance of getting this funding. So I'll mention it again, those sessions that we're doing specifically for people from underrepresented communities, we're doing them only for them to make sure that they can have those applications and then get this funding off to us, right? So I think that the amount of funding is important, but it's also giving people the tools to do those applications that are going to get them the funding, because just increasing an amount, if you don't help people have really, you know, excellent applications, doesn't always help, right? So we're trying to do both at the same time.
Maybe add one thing, Anthony, and correct me if I'm wrong on this. I know this program isn't one of Factor's mainstay programs, but the support for live music events funding that was provided by the federal government. I believe I did read that in the FAQ for that priority in dissemination of those funds would be given to equity-seeking groups, Indigenous-led organizations. I'm going to put the link to that one in the chat here too, because this one I think is open to artist entrepreneurs in addition to music venues, managers, others. So I just think this is a fabulous program. Correct.
So yeah, no, thank you. Absolutely. 100%. One thing though that I will mention, the only people that are eligible were past recipients of the Canada Music Fund. So just make sure that you are eligible if you apply to that. So the programs that I mentioned are eligible to everyone. And this other one is not necessarily everybody. But yeah, that one, absolutely. Because again, like I said, we're in a position now where, you know, the government and everyone recognizes that we want to have more equity. So as its newest program, this one does prioritize Indigenous and equity seeking groups. So yeah, thank you, Corey, for mentioning that.
All right. So we're running up against the clock. Did you want to add anything to that, Aisha?
I did. I know we're short on time though, so please proceed. I was just going to say Ontario Creates does not have specific programs. However, we've embedded, so it's a two-pronged conversation. It's opening the door to more applications from equity-seeking groups, but it's also holding current recipients more accountable to be also more diverse and equitable. So there's two ways of hitting at a more inclusive industry, and our objective through making adjustments to our application and assessment process and embedding diversity throughout all of the assessment criteria, and then holding applicants accountable to deliver on becoming more diverse and inclusive, and funding at lower amounts and reallocating those funds towards more new applicants is sort of a two-pronged approach that we're taking to try to make a more equitable distribution of funding.
Thank you for that. That's a very, very valuable point. We're coming up to the end of it now, and if I don't see another question here, I'll just wrap it up by saying thank you to all of you, Aisha, Anthony, Corey, Dwayne, for being a part of this session. Folks will have an opportunity, if they missed the live stream of this on Zoom, folks will have an opportunity to also see it on our site and also on YouTube as well. And this entire music conference has been a new experience for us, delivering it on Zoom, and you know, the technology is something we're learning, me remembering to turn my microphone on, for example. You know, so it's something we're all adjusting to, but thus far it's been a very positive experience. I want to use this opportunity as well to shout out the fact that we are having another keynote speaker, Alex Kresovich, who's a multi-platinum producer, who, after making bank in the music industry, decided to go back to school. And he's now working on his PhD, doing a lot of research in terms of rap music and the changing conversation as it relates to mental health. Mental health is one of the epidemics in this pandemic. And so, you know, there's some new research that he released late last year that I think is very important. I don't want to get ahead of myself, but he talks about the value and the importance of Kanye West in helping to spark the dialogue on this, and we're looking forward to having him tomorrow. That starts at 2 o'clock, and as usual, it goes till 3:30. So we want you to tune in for that if you can, and as I said, it'll be on YouTube later on. As well, we have to thank once again Anthony Johnson and the folks at Factor for you know, being sponsors of this. And we also would like to thank the Department of Canadian Heritage and the crew at Our Music Festival for making this happen. And again, to all of you, Dwayne, Corey, Anthony, Aisha, thanks again for making this possible. And I have some breaking news, Aisha. Kyle Lowry is staying with us. So, so we're all happy with that. But Norm was traded to Portland. So good luck to Norm, and happy to hear that Kyle will probably get to retire Raptor, as he rightly should. So thanks to everybody, and we hope that you'll join us again at some point in the future. Peace, love, and blessings. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Phil and Donna.
Alrighty.
Thank you, everyone. It was great being here.
You. Definitely. Thank you for having me.
Have a good evening.
Bye,
Take
everyone.
care.
Stay safe.